The third wave of feminism allegedly started when Anita Hill delivered her testimony against Clarence Thomas, who had sexually harassed her. In an all-white male court, Rebecca Walker, who had seen the testimony on television, responded with an article in the Mrs. magazine called "Becoming the Third Wave" in 1992. So I write this as a plea to all women, especially women of my generation, that Thomas' confirmation serves to remind you, as it did me, that the fight is far from over. Let this dismissal of a woman's experience move you to anger. Turn that outrage into political power. Do not vote for them unless they work for us. Do not have sex with them. Do not break bread with them. Do not nurture them if they don't prioritize our freedom to control our bodies and our lives. I'm not a post-feminine feminist. I am the third wave.
Focusing on sexual power and reclaiming femininity, third wavers fought for women to be assertive and in control. The pillars for their success lie in the second wave, but the third wavers were a bit more radical.
It is, however, good to address that the waves before the third focus almost exclusively on middle-class white women and ignored black, queer and other minority women.
In contrast to their perception of their mother's feminism, third wavers that feel entitled to interact with men as equals, claim sexual pleasures as they desire it, heterosexual or otherwise, and actively play with femininity, girl power or girly culture. It is a central yet contested strand within the third wave. Its proponents argue that our desires aren't simply booby traps set by a patriarchy.
The book There She Goes Again by Aviva Dove Viban expresses how hard it is for filmmakers to empower this femininity. While making a female protagonist feminine, they simultaneously force her into gender roles or misinterpret these feminine traits as weak. The phrase, strong female characters, is primarily used in the popular press to address women's role in contemporary film and television, and vacillates from praise to pointed critique. In many cases, reviewers and critics have used the expression to condemn creators and promoters of mainstream female characters who reject ostensibly feminine weaknesses like emotionality, gentleness, nurturing behavior, altruism, obedience to authority and passivity, and replace them with toughness, strength, physical or emotional, rationality or taciturn self-confidence, rather than creating a fully realized multidimensional female character. So, to empower female leads, most writers give them masculine character traits and thereby reinforce the idea that femininity is a sign of weakness. This also means most feminist films portray empowered women as masculine and feminine women as weak and still bound to the patriarchal norms. Aviva finds this a contradiction, since feminism is about equality for women, not women pretending to be men. This trope is easily identifiable in the next film. To be empowered, Jo believes she must be a boy.
In the historical drama Little Women, gender roles are discussed. A woman can be more than just a wife and a mother. The movie is set in 1860, during the US Civil War. 4 sisters grew up while their father is fighting in the war. The main character is Jo, who wants to be a writer. Because it wasn't common for girls to pursue their careers, Jo often wishes she was a boy. She wants to fight wars and make her own choices. She moves to New York against all odds and strives to be a female writer. There she meets a German professor who supports her. In the end, Jo starts her own school in a house she inherited and employs the professor, who is now her husband. The film may not show direct signs of being a third-wave film, but is certainly a feminist staple piece.
We all know the all-time favorite classic film, Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump is a 1994 romantic comedy directed by Robert Zemeckis, starring Tom Hanks as the main character. The movie tells the story of an unintelligent man called Forrest Gump. Forrest grows up in Alabama. He lives with his mother, who constantly teaches him to love himself and not to care what anyone else thinks. During his childhood, Forrest develops a special friendship with Jenny, his childhood love.
Forrest's life is marked with a bunch of extraordinary experiences. He meets Elvis Presley, who then copies his moves. He became a star football player in college, simply because he was a fast runner. He serves in the war, after which he starts a multi-million-dollar shrimp company called Bubba Gump, in honor of his best friend in the Vietnam War, Bubba. Forrest inspires cultural historical phenomena such as the smiley or shit happens. He becomes the star ping-pong player after the army, and in the end he runs 3 times across the country, inspiring people from all around. Throughout his life, Jenny keeps making appearances and continuously leaves. Jenny has struggled since childhood with abuse and addiction. This has, however, never stopped Forrest from loving Jenny.
In the end, it is revealed that Forrest has a son with Jenny, after the two had spent one romantic night in Forrest's childhood home. The two marry and Jenny passes shortly after, due to an unknown HIV-related disease. The story, however, is presented with several sexist themes. Forrest's mom, Mrs. Gump, is one of the most prominent female characters in the film. Her only purpose in the film is to help men achieve their goals. She is not a career-oriented woman and her only purpose is to bring the most out of young, unintelligent Forrest. When Forrest is denied access to school due to his low IQ of 75, his mom takes matters into her own hands and sleeps with the principal. She is portrayed as a sexual object to help another man, her son. This signifies that men do not value her for anything more than her body and sexual purposes.
Another constantly reappearing woman is of course Jenny. Jenny was portrayed as a weak and young molested child who needed help and protection. Jenny is encountered with objectification, men taking advantage of her, domestic violence, and substance abuse. Jenny is seen experimenting with her body and different subcultures, and somehow anything she does ends up taking advantage of her. The film presents a simplistic moral dichotomy where Forrest's naive goodness is contrasted with Jenny's complex and troubled character. This can reinforce the stereotype that women who step outside traditional gender roles and experiment with their lives end up suffering for their choices.
When analyzing films, we use the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test was made in 1985 by Alison Bechdel as a criterion if you wanted to watch a film or not. The test has 3 critical points. 1. The film needs to have at least 2 female characters. 2. These characters need to interact with each other and have a conversation. 3. The conversation must revolve around something other than a man. This sounds pretty easy to pass, right? Well, it isn't. Examples of films that did not pass the test are The Lord of the Rings, The Adventures, Harry Potter, Avatar, Silence of the Lambs, and surprisingly, Forrest Gump and Belle and Sofa. Even some of the other feminist films barely pass the test, like Mulan or The Ballad of Josie. Mulan has a few conversations with her grandma and mother about family, honor, and the war, but the underlying tone often revolves around her father.